Okay, so this afternoon we are going to continue our discussion of exceptions. So last 2 weeks ago we discussed how to handle exceptions. Then this week we're going to continue with that discussion of how to handle, but except we will be talking about how to handle something called an assertion. That's what we're going to be talking about, how to handle an assertion. And after that, we are also going to look at another way of how to handle files. 3 weeks ago, we saw how to open text files, how to read them, and also how to write text files. That's what we did about 3 weeks ago. So this week, we're going to try to look at a different approach of doing the same thing. What we are going to start with is something called handling assertions. Now, an assertion is basically you trying to check that what information you are giving your functions or your programs to use is correct. So there is a way of checking if you're going to run a function, then, or you're going to create a function, and that function has to be given information. Then you want to check if the information is which a function is being given is correct or not. And this is all part of writing or good programming practice. As I'm going to import this module called this, you will see that in Python we attach a lot of importance of value when it comes to handling problems and also exceptions. And here, this here it says errors should never pass silently. So you should not allow an error to pass silently unless you do so. So there is a lot of effort which goes into handling problems like this. Now, the way we are going to assert to make sure that our function has the right kind of values is by using a statement called assert. This assert problem. So you start with assert, then you give assert an expression which you want to test. So you give assert an expression, then after that, if you have other things you want to do, you can give this thing arguments. So you're going to see how this looks. So just kind of copy this a bit, and we're going to use it as an example of what we want to do. So here, I'll remove this. So what we have here is we're trying to create a function which works out the area of a circle. So this function calculates the area of a circle. And that is something which you might have to do once in a while. So in this function, for us to do this, create this function using Python, we start with def, define. Hope you still remember how to create functions. You define. Then after the def, define, then comes the name of the function. In this case, the name of the function is area circle. So this gives you a very good idea that this function actually works out the area of a circle. And for us to work out the area of a circle, we're going to need a radius, like this. A radius. Okay. Then this radius, we're going to use this radius to calculate the area of a circle. Now, for us to do the calculation of the area of a circle, of course, you need pi. So we're going to get pi from the math module. Then that's why we're going to get the value of pi. So we're going to say here we're going to make an import of pi. We say from math import pi. So this gives us access to the value of pi. Then after that we work out what the area is. So that's pi times this power. Then the power function. This power function will give you the radius, which you've got from here, and this radius is squared. So this should give us an expression of radius. And whatever stuff is going to be worked out in terms of radius, we are going to store that in a variable. We're going to store that in a variable called area. And after that, we're going to return the value of the area there. Okay. So next, we run this function a bit, then that's what we get there. I'll pause a bit.
So I didn't see what you had done. Maybe if you could go through.
Okay, so I'm saying that the way we do an assertion is you use this word assert. Then after this assert, you followed by an expression. Then this expression checks some particular condition, if that particular condition is met or not. Then if that condition is met, then you can display some message. Now the reason why you do an assert is because you are trying to check for certain information which is being given to a function which might lead to that particular function giving you an answer which doesn't make sense. Are we clear? A good example is the case of this function here. This function here works out the radius of a circle. So I define this function, which is def. Then I say the name of the function is area circle. Then this function accepts a parameter called radius, one parameter called radius. Then here in this doc screen, I explain what this function is supposed to do. Now for me to work out the area of a circle, of course I need the value of pi. So I get the value of pi from this module, math module. So I say from math, import pi. Okay. Next, I multiply pi times this. This is the radius raised to the power 2. So pi times radius raised to the power 2. That gives me the area, and that is what I store here. Then I give you what the area is. So do you understand what we have done here as we are trying to work out the area?
Yes.
Okay. Now, all this is good, and on the surface, it looks like our function will work. And on the surface, it looks like it will work. However, the problem comes in when someone gives you a radius of 0. Because you don't have a circle which has got a radius of 0. Are we clear? So it's going to work out the radius, and it will tell you this is what the area is. Okay? Or when someone gives you a radius which is negative, you surely don't have radiuses which are negative. Are we clear? So there are certain values of radius which you might want to give. Someone might not understand that radius cannot be 0 or radius is negative. So you want to take care of certain obvious situations which might lead to your function giving a value which doesn't make sense. Are we clear? Okay, so in this case, for example, if you work out the radius for an area of radius, if the radius is equal to 10 here, so area circle, then you say radius. If radius is 10 here, you don't have any problem. It gives you this value like that. Okay, but if the radius turns out to be 0, if the radius is 0, it will still work out the value of radius, but it will tell you that the area is equal to 0. Is this clear?
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense because you don't have a circle with radius 0. So you want to make sure that this function of yours, area circle, does not accept radiuses which are equal to 0. You also want to make sure that this function does not accept radiuses which are negative. Like, for example, if we say, okay, fine, the radius is going to be negative 7.5 or 6.5 as a radius, like that. If you give it a radius of negative 6.5, this thing will try to work out a value and tell you, so, oh, for a 6.5, this is a radius. For negative 6.5, this is the value of radius you get. If you run this, it works out something and tells you, oh, this is a radius. This is the area if your radius is negative 6.5. Are we clear? Are you seeing what I'm trying to say here?
Yes.
Yes. So these values, 0 and negative 6.5, they create problems because you might not be aware that you have made a mistake. Maybe you wanted to say 6.5. You wanted to say 6.5, but you typed a negative somewhere. So you might not be aware that you made a mistake. So what you want is to be told that the radius is must be negative, or that the radius must always be equals to, must be positive, greater than 0. Are we clear?
Very clear.
So we're going to make some modifications to our program. For example, we do not want that the radius be equals to 0. So the assertion here is going to be radius must be greater than 0. We don't want a negative radius, and you also don't want the radius which is equal to 0. So we are saying radius must be greater than 0. Ensure that the radius is non-zero and that it's positive. So ensure that the radius is non-zero and that it's positive. So before you do any import here, you put this assert statement. This is assert statement you're talking about. So this assert is going to check if the radius is greater than 0. So greater than 0 ensures that the radius is not equal to 0, and also it ensures that the radius is always positive. Okay? Are we clear?
Yes, clear.
So this assert, then this one, radius greater than 0. That's what you call the expression here. So we have assert, then the expression is the radius greater than 0. So Python, before it does anything, Python will check to see if the radius is greater than 0. Okay? So we're going to say redefine the area circle function. Redefine the function to include an assertion, an assert statement, to include an assert statement, that checks that radius is positive and non-zero. So apart from being, we want to check that our radius is always positive and equals to non-zero. So we include this assert statement. So if it turns out that the radius is 0 or the radius is negative, then the function should not even bother to go forward to try to work out anything, because we only want to work out things if the radius is positive and that it's non-zero. So that's what we want to do. Okay, so that's what we do. You can ensure that radius is positive, and non-zero. So that's how you check. That's how you enforce this requirement, by using assert here. Assert radius greater than 0. Then after that, if at any point if the radius is equal to 0, don't even go forward. Generate an error, but we also know how to take care of these errors, so that's there. Okay, so we have redefined the function. So next we calculate. If we calculate our function here with a radius of 10, like here, 10 does not give us any problems. There we are. Now if we work out our radius, our function with the radius of 0, now instead of working out, giving you the, remember here earlier it worked out an area which is equals to 0. Instead of working out this, it should tell you that there's an error there. So now it tells you, oh, there is an error, something called an assertion error. Okay, and here if you point here, line number 5, it tells you that the error was generated by this line, asset greater than 0. And there's an assertion error there. Are we clear?
Very clear.
Yes. Now it no longer works out an area for a radius which is equal to 0. If radius is equal to 0, it no longer works out. It no longer gives you a value. It tells you there's a problem with that. Also, if the radius is negative, for example, in this case, 6.5, if the radius is negative 6.5, now even this one is also caught. It doesn't work out something, because again it tells you here this condition, this requirement has not been met. Are we clear?
Yes.
So this is what an assert does. When you include an assert statement in your function, it catches, it prevents the function from accepting certain pieces of information which we know are going to lead to inaccurate results. Are we clear?
Yes.
Okay, now there is a deficiency in this thing. We are told that there's an assert error, and we are also shown what line is causing the error, but there is no other information about this error. Okay? There is no other information which is available about this particular error which you're looking at. So there is more which you can do, and that more includes adding an argument, this part. So we have looked at how to use assert. So you type assert, this part, you type assert like that, assert, then expression. So that is a radius greater than 0. But there's also this part which is in square brackets, the square arguments. So when something is in square brackets like that, in an expression, it means that it's optional. Right now, our assert works without whatever is the argument there. Okay, but we can include that argument in our case, which is going to make things much better in our case. So in this case, if I make a copy of this, then I take it down. So here we redefine again our assert function, that. Now we're going to include something here. We say that, then we add something. Say radius must be positive and non-zero. So we add this. Say radius must be positive and non-zero. When we add this, this piece of information here, radius must be positive and non-zero, is going to be displayed together with the assert error message. Are we clear?
Yes.
So when you do that, now you work out this thing for radius equals to 10. Radius equals to 10. That one works. Now when you come to radius equals to 0, it tells you there's an assert error, and here also assert error, but now you receive more information about what kind of assert error is there. You see this?
Yes.
Radius must be positive and non-zero. This information previously here was not available. It was supposed to be here, but there's nothing there being printed out. Also here, there was nothing there. Now that piece of information has been included in our set thing. Say, oh, the radius has to be, okay, the radius has to be positive, and also it has to be equals to non-zero. Again, here in this, if we try to give a negative radius, 6.5, so if we say 6.5 like that, say radius equals to 6.5. This time around, if you try to run this again, you receive that. Okay, and your program cuts. Are we clear?
Yes.
So this is how you make sure that your program only accepts. This is how you make sure that your program only accepts radiuses which are positive and radiuses which are not equals to 0. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is, since we know that the value which a person has entered, since we know that the value which a person has entered can cause an error, depending on what value a person has entered, we can get this error, this assertion error. Okay, if a person enters a radius which is equals to 0 or a radius which is negative, we are going to get that error. We have learned how to handle these errors. Are we clear?
Yes.
That is for chapter 13a, where we're saying handling exceptions by using a try block. Okay, so this is if you look here, this is a line which is causing the error. This is what is causing the error. Okay, this assert radius greater than 0. This is the one that is causing the error. Are we clear?
Yes.
So what we do is, if we suspect in our program a line is going to cause an error, we put it in a try except block. That particular line which we suspect might cause an error, we put it in a try except block. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yes, because we don't want to frighten, you don't want to frighten the person who is using your program. You don't want to frighten them with all this red stuff all over the screen. Okay? You want to handle the error properly. You want to handle the error properly so that the person is not scared. You just tell them nicely, say, no, the answer, the radius they're supposed to give you is supposed to be positive and also supposed to be non-zero, than kind of like shouting at them like this. This is how Python does things, but we have seen that there are better ways of doing this. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to redefine this function, this area circle, so that it includes an exception and also a try except block. Are we clear? We're going to redefine this function so that it has an exception and also a try except block. Redefine area circle to include a set statement that checks that radius is positive and negative, and a try except block. In a try except block, not in a try except block. In a try except block. So in a try. So if you suspect something can cause an error in your program, then you put it in a try except block. And that is what we're going to do. So this is what we have. Where is our thing here so far? Okay, so we come down again. Okay, so what we're going to do is the following. We'll say try. Okay, so we try to work out the radius. If it works, fine. So the first thing we're going to do is this. So we check. So we try to do this. If it works out, fine. If it doesn't work out, then we know what to do. So here I was saying calculate the area. Okay, so all this bit, if it works, if this radius is greater than 0, then after that it will import and work out the calculation like that. Otherwise, if it doesn't, then we need to take care of this situation where this thing doesn't work. So the kind of error we are expecting is an assertion error. So I think we can say here assertion error. This one. What doesn't? Okay, so what are we supposed to do if this is an assertion error? There might be some other kind of error which might do, but we're interested in this one where we know that the radius could be positive, should be positive and non-zero. This is the first thing we're interested in. Radius, we'll say radius must be positive, and non-zero. So we want to tell the person, no, so the radius must be positive and non-zero nicely. Otherwise, the person might also give you a radius which is a letter, right? If the person types a radius which is equals to 1a, or they type 4 in words, then how are you supposed to do that? So in that case, there is also another thing you can do. So that is this side here. So I'm going to do this. Do a copy. So we do a simple import of this module. Then this gives us information about the error which has happened. And if it's not an assertion error but some other kind of error, then we can do a print. Okay, then there, then what do you need? Error 0 and error 1. So here, error 0, because usually this information we're going to get from here is going to be a tuple. So it will be this error, when an error which is not one of the things we were looking for here, any other error happens apart from this, something else could happen. Maybe someone gives you a letter or something which is not a number. Okay, then this exception should pick that up and tell you what kind of error has happened. So that information about the error, since it's very important, is going to be given to you in a tuple. So we are accessing that tuple here. So we get the first element of that tuple, it will give you the type of error. Then the second element of that tuple, it will try to give you a description of what kind of error has occurred. Delete this. Okay, so like this. So here we try to check if the radius is positive, it's positive, then we import pi, then work out area, then it give you a value of area. If we try to check here that the radius is positive, but we find that the radius is 0 or the radius is negative, then this should cause an error. Then you're going to pick up that error here in this assert error here. Then you print out this message nicely, say no, the radius must be positive and non-zero. Otherwise, if it's some other kind of error, then you're going to pick it up from here. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is how you combine assertions with exceptions to handle errors. So in this case, we'll start with the radius, something which is going to cause an error. For example, a radius which is equals to 0. So we say radius equals to 0. When you do that, now you no longer get this red stuff, this assertion error, stuff like that. Now you just get a nice, neat message telling you, no, the radius must be positive and non-zero. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, we can even improve it a bit. We can say, what? Yeah. So just that's fine. The radius must be positive and non-zero. If you want to work out the radius for 6.5, which is a negative number, so you say radius is equals to 6.5, which is negative. Then again, it tells you radius must be positive and non-zero. If you decide to work out the radius, let's say a radius of the weight 6. So in this case, I'll copy something. Then you say calculate the radius of 6, the weight 6. Now this is not actually even the number 6, but this number 6, this 6.5 is in quotation marks. You see that? That 6.5 is in quotation marks. So that is a string. So if I say area circle, then radius equals to 6.5. With radius equals to 6.5, now this tells you something here. You get a different kind of error. It says there is an error code type error. Then what else are you told? Not supported between instances of strings and integers. So it says you can't carry out a calculation which involves a string and integers, like in this case. So this is how you would handle this problem. Are we clear?
Yes.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, so if we are okay, that's good. So this marks the end of this error business. Handling errors, handling exceptions, and assertions. So there are two chapters. There's chapter 13a and 13b. So we have just completed 13b. There is another chapter which talks about the one we looked at earlier, handling files. There is another way to handle files, and that's what we're going to look at when we meet at 16 hours. So let's go for a break, then let's come back at 16 hours.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.